The Theory of Political Economy by William Stanley Jevons. Chapter 4 Theory of Exchange. Part 14 Problems in the Theory of Exchange. We have hitherto considered only one simple case of the theory of exchange. In all other cases where the commodities are capable of indefinite subdivisions, the principles will be exactly the same, but the particular conditions may be subject to variation. We may firstly express the conditions of a great market where vast quantities of some stock are available, so that any one small trader will not appreciably affect the ratio of exchange. This ratio is, then, approximately a fixed number, and each trader exchanges at that ratio just so much as suits him. These circumstances may be represented by supposing A to be a trading body possessing two very large stocks of commodities A and B. Let C be a person who possesses a comparatively small quantity C of the second commodity and gives a portion of it Y, which is very small, compared with B, in exchange for a portion X of A, which is very small compared with A. Then after exchange we shall find A in possession of the quantities A minus X and B plus Y, and C in possession of X and C minus Y. The equations will become phi1 a minus x over psi1 b plus y equals y over x equals phi2 x over psi2 c minus y. Since a minus x and b plus y, by supposition, do not appreciably differ from a and b, we may substitute the latter quantities, and we have for the first equation approximately phi1a over psi1b equals y over x equals m. The ratio of exchange being an approximately fixed ratio determined by the conditions of the trading body A, there is, in reality, only one undetermined quantity, X, the quantity of commodity which C finds it advantageous to purchase by expending part of C. This will now be determined by the equation phi1a over psi1b equals phi2x over psi2c minus mx. This equation will represent the condition in regard to any one distinct commodity of a very small country trading with a much larger one. It might represent to some extent the circumstances of trade between the Channel Islands and the great market of England, though of course it is never absolutely verified because the smallest purchasers do affect the market in some degree. The equation still more accurately represents the position of an individual consumer with regard to the aggregate trade of a large community, since he must buy at the current prices, which he cannot in any appreciable degree affect. A still simpler formula, however, is needed to represent the conditions of a large part of our purchases. In many cases we want so little of a commodity that an individual need not give more than a very small fraction of his possessions to obtain it. We may suppose then that y in the last problem is a very small part of c, so that psi2 c minus y does not differ appreciably from psi2 c. Taking m as before to be the existing ratio of exchange, we have only one equation, phi2x over psi2c equals m, or phi2x equals m psi2c. This means that C will buy of the commodity until its degree of utility falls below that of the commodity he gives. A person's expenditure on salt is in this country an inconsiderable item of expense. What he thus spends does not make him appreciably poorer. Yet if the established price or ratio is 1 penny for each pound of salt, he buys in any time, say 1 year, so many pounds of salt that an additional pound would not have so much utility to him as a penny. In the above equation m psi2c represents the utility to him of a penny, which being an inconsiderable fraction of his possessions is approximately invariable in utility, and he buys salt until phi2x, which is approximately the utility of the next pound, is equal to, or it may be somewhat less than that of the penny. But this case must not be confused with that of purchases, which appreciably affect the possessions of the purchaser. Thus if a poor family purchase much butcher's meat, they will probably have to go without something else. The more they buy, the lower the final degree of utility of the meat and the higher the final degree of utility of something else, and thus these purchases will be the more narrowly limited.